funny is after a while, when you start to look at everything, okay, and let's say you get real heavy into your meditative practices, you get real heavy into basically like self-awareness, and I'm talking about having control of these bodily urges and desires to want to see things outside of itself for, you know, fulfillment and whatnot. I'll give you an example. Even like people who seek validation, or people who seek attention, or people who seek outside things to basically have them feel fulfilled. All right, when I'm talking about you start to gain this self-awareness, everything starts to look a lot more mystical. See, I made the example of how this dude appeared out of nowhere with these magic mushrooms. Just upon me being in the mindset of, you know, pondering about these psychoactive drugs and basically just talking about it on camera, how life just happens to bring shit to you. I mentioned this in actuality, even with gardening. Now, this is proof that everything is love. There's nothing here rooted out of like fear or anything like that. It's just attraction. All right. And there was a point where I needed wood chips. I desperately needed wood chips for my garden. And this was when I started. I had my garden already in my mind set up to look a certain way and be a certain way. I wanted to go and do the method, back to Eden method, which is basically laying down cardboard and applying wood chips on top so that you're not basically moving the soil. It's just, you know, decomposing and breaking down the grass so that I can plant my plants there the following year. When the grass dies down, I've already got a nice layer of natural compost right on top of that earth, right? All I gotta do is dig a little hole and apply my plant there. And for some reason it did something to me to open the soil. It's not something I wanted to do because it wasn't something that was resonating with me. To, you know, I see people tilling and turning over the soil. For some reason that didn't appeal to me. I looked at it as a stomach that shouldn't be fucked with. And if it is in balance, all you got to do is do things that's going to help it get back into balance. But anyway, I see that as a loving frequency. Because once I did that and I started to grow these plants, just walking in the garden, I started to have a realization of what love is. You know, love is that growing, harmonious frequency that you're experiencing when you see things flowering and, you know, nature just blooming. And you start to see the ecosystem just balancing itself out, even through the things you would look at as, oh, a bug eating another bug or an animal eating another animal. You get what I'm saying? It's all still harmoniously happening under love. I got the sun directly right in my face, so that's why I got to put this visor down. But you realize that everything you're looking at, you're already having a psychedelic trip, a psychoactive experience. You'll start to see that everything really is in the mind, and the mind is all, and the universe is mental. And you'll start to see these things present themselves to you, but it's just if you have your eyes to see and your ears to hear, or your ears to see and your eyes to basically hear, and your ears to see. So with this basically coming in mind, I say, well, we could look at this world as like a heaven or a hell. In actuality, what matters is how you live your life, the experience you have. Did you love life? What was your relationship to life in general? What was the experience you had with people outside of you, the places you came in contact with, and what was your relationship to that? What's your relationship to life? So in order for you to have a partner, you build that relationship by putting time with that relationship, right? You get to know the goods and bads. You get to know about that person. You see a lot of yourself in that person. But you have this same relationship with life in general. And the funny thing is that you can have a good trip or a bad trip under these psychoactive drugs, but I look at it as an enhanced experience, you know, of like, you know, here's the thing. When you do certain drugs like alcohol, and you already feel depressed, you're going to amplify that experience even more. If you're happy, then you may want to drink to celebrate. It's just enhancing your experience, but it's also doing what psychoactive drugs do, which is melt the ego away. Because, I mean, you don't notice that you're a lot more brave when you're drunk. You're afraid to talk to girls, yet somehow you talk to girls a lot easier when you're drunk. You're a lot looser. It's the same thing with this, just on another level. It's another tier of drug, right? That doesn't have, lingering hangovers or anything like that. But it's no different than just like taking steroids. Steroids are drugs too. So you see all these drugs. We look at some drugs as good drugs, some drugs as bad drugs. But there's people who do steroids and they can do big things with it, where they can go and be Mr. Olympia and make money out of it. And then there's the fucking loser motherfuckers who'll just take it just to fucking look good. But they're just taking an expensive drug, something extremely expensive, just to fucking look better. Just because it could be coming rooted out of insecurities. It could be rooted out of lack of self-acceptance. So they need to take this to make themselves feel better and say, this is what I want to look like. I don't accept how I look like originally. So it's still coming out of a deep-rooted trauma. So some people try to take this drug, right, for recreational purposes, like the psychoactive drug I'm talking about, just to have a party drug. And then you talk to them afterwards, they're no more enlightened than anybody else. You ask them, hey, how was that drug? Oh my God, that was the coolest drug ever. I saw so many colors and people and everything just looked so cool. And then they're just dumb as rocks afterwards. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't get nothing out of it. And that's because their foundation was just not, it wasn't in the right mindset. So when it comes to like steroids, obviously you're gonna at least have a base, work out, right? Be an athlete, or at least work out with your natural hormone levels intact. And then let's say later on in life, if you're starting to decline in age and your hormone levels start to drop and you want to consider doing that, the TRT or the which is testosterone replacement therapy, or like steroids, then that's on you. You know what I'm saying? It's actually going to be better for your health, because if you have low T, I mean, it's going to fuck up your health overall, even your mental state. However, you still got to find out why your test levels are low. Even if you're older, doesn't mean that because they're low, you go take TRT because it's detrimental for your health. Because in actuality, it's low for a reason. You shouldn't have T levels that low to begin with. If you look at our old forefathers, they were having sex at 90. And why? It was just the lifestyle. Certain things here are affecting your hormone levels. And hormones, I look at as harmony. And harmony, I look at that's closely tied in with the word love. Hormones, harmony, is all love. And love is the answer to everything. So when you start to see that hormone levels drop, a lot of people are actually getting further and further from their heart space the more you come in contact or depend on technology. I remember back in the day, to talk to a girl, you would go up to her and you would have a conversation with her. You would actually start to break the ice and whatnot. You may go up to her, whatever. It could be in a bar, it could be in the gym, it could be whatever. Now everything's dependent on apps, social media, meeting people online, or meeting people, let's say, in parties or shit like that. But it's like a lot of the times you're under the influence. It wasn't like it was at one point where you just did it and we didn't have the means of technology. Your heart is basically the projector of this reality. So if you're not in your heart space, you're not home, you're not centered. You're basically outside of yourself, but not having a direct outside of yourself experience. Because you know what's funny? I mentioned in the last video, how could you experience yourself if you've never been outside of yourself? And I'm talking about on a spiritual level, being outside of yourself, but you're already outside of yourself. It's just you don't even realize that you are outside of yourself, because it's done in an unnatural way. So when a lot of people do drugs, instead of reaching some type of spiritual height, they're getting further and further away from what it's supposed to be, right? Because you're doing it from a space where you're already outside of yourself. This is why I said even in the last video, if you're gonna do it, just do it for the experience purpose of it. All right, because right now all you're doing is experiencing life. Everything's supposed to come down to an experience. This is designed because outside, let's say whatever you're experiencing, and we say this is an illusion, this is not real. But through this illusion and through this unreal or through this false reality is why you're able to see truth, right? Because you're recognizing the false, you can see the lie. If you're somewhere in the middle, let's say, then you can actually see both sides of the spectrum. But do you ever notice that sometimes one polar opposite end could force you into the opposite end of what it is? Like the pendulum swinging. The middle, I can see it as just comfort. The average human just living like a normal animal. You get what I'm saying? But when you're in extremes, it may be where you're in such a fucked up space that you may hate your situation so much, it may force you to change, right? But that forceful change can be a good thing. However, it can still go into layers too, because you could forcefully change out of fear, which could still potentially get you in a better place. Or you could forcefully change out of love because you realize you don't deserve the position you're in. So you say, I don't want to be in this space. I'm going to change this position I'm in. So I'm going to put myself in a loving space because I don't deserve this. And that's from that. You hated that position so much that it forced you to change. So I look at everything as opportunities, right? Even just looking at things that are opposing to you. That's opportunities for you. Business, right? You analyze numbers, you analyze charts, and you analyze the low points, you analyze the high points, right? And then you get data. How could you make, your business thrive based on the lows and highs? Just by reading charts. So you look at your life overall, and you're designed to experience these things, but the experience is going to come through two ways. So when I mentioned data, you could learn from others' mistakes by looking at what they did and you not repeating the same thing, or you can make the mistakes yourself and go through the fucked up experience, get traumatized, and then it forces you to change. See, I've always been the type that doesn't like to work too hard. I've already said this in plenty of videos. So as a manager getting in the business, let's say the business operator that I was actually working as, I was always a manager. I always climbed the ranks by paying attention to the auditor, doing an audit on my manager, the manager that was above me. And whatever he was fucked up in or didn't do well in, I took that as notes for myself. And then when I climbed the charts, I made sure I didn't repeat the same things. This is how I strived and became the best at everything I did as far as business operator and manager at the highest tier. Bonuses out the wazoo, you get what I'm saying? And that was just through learning through others' mistakes. I choose not to go through the fearful moments or the, anxiety moments. Never been really my thing. I don't see, I work well under pressure. You get what I'm saying? I've mentioned this before, where if somebody's pressing me, you get my adrenaline going, my creative juices flow. Because the adrenaline flowed, it gets me kind of like a real life Incredible Hulk. I become an unstoppable juggernaut, right? And the only thing that can stop me is if I start to doubt myself. So now when it comes down to pressing me, under pressure, you create diamonds, right? But under pressure, you get stronger and bigger. Like you put your muscles under stress in the gym, you get bigger and stronger. The unnecessary stresses would be like stresses of bills and fucked up relationships, but these are things that you just didn't manage to begin with. See, if you had your finances in order, this has a lot to do with your responsibilities as a person, how you deal with, what are your work ethics, what your mindset is toward certain things that you do. Do you do things you love to do? Do you go through the sacrifices in the beginning to not like the process, but at the end it pays off? Kind of like things like that. The relationships, are you reflecting on the relationship or are you just projecting? You know what I'm saying? You'll find the right girl if you get to know yourself first, right? So you get yourself ready for everything. That's why I said everything's like a psychedelic trip. Before you jump into a relationship, you should be straight mentally, right? You should be straight physically, and you should be straight financially. Because if not, you're gonna go through the fucked up situations with your partner, right? You would do the same thing having kids. So everything is kind of like a preparation, the same way you prepare before you take an ayahuasca trip. Because this is why people said, what happens to you in 10 minutes is equivalent to what would have happened to you in 10 years. So what do you have to do then? Right? You prepare yourself before you take it. The same way you prepare yourself for your life plan in the next 5 or 10 years, same thing. I prepare for my gardening, right, in the wintertime. And I made a video on that, which is called the 33. And that's actually a very good video because it ties into what the actual new year is. The new year starts in the spring equinox, and how even the process of winter really is new year. When you look at October, right? October is really month 1 because 1 + 0 is 1. That's actually pretending, right, to be the new year, October. And then you got pretending to be the New Year's January. But I'm going to tell you why. October is month 1. All right. November is month 2 because that's number 11. 1 + 1 is 2. And then December is month 3 because that's 1 + 2 is 3. You get what I'm saying? So through October being a spiritual month because it's Halloween, All Hallows Eve, okay, is equivalent to what you would do in January. January is technically the heart of winter, and winter overall is a spiritual holiday, a spiritual season rather. The summer is more physical. You going out enjoying the fruits of your labor. You got month 2, that's February, that's love, harmony, thankfulness, gratefulness. That's equivalent to what we look at as November, Thanksgiving. And then month 3 would be December, right? Right here, what do we got? March is month 3. And then March 21st, you got spring equinox, right? So we get into April, that's the month of Aries. I mean, that's the season of Aries. That's number 1, the first in the zodiac sign. That's how right after December, which is month 3, equivalent to March, month 3, you got the new year coming in, which is April. April would be what you look at as January. And that's when I'm born, by the way. My birthday's in April. I'm an Aries. And this is why I'm first in flight. And what's funny is I live in the state of North Carolina, and North Carolina is known as a state for first in flight. It's funny how all these things just magically, coincidentally, or synchronistically tie in together, right? Like I said, you're having a psychedelic experience. So when I spoke about before, when I needed something as far as wood chips go, they just happened. You see, I prepped the garden up in the way I needed it to be prepped up, but as if I've already had the wood chips. Because I kept going to Lowe's and Walmart and I kept putting it off because first of all, they were too expensive. So I didn't want to buy those, and they were tinted. It looked like broken down pallets. They were splintered, nasty wood. It was ugly. So I kept putting it off until somebody walked into my place of business. And then all of a sudden, what they did was they started conversation with me. And they told me that I was basically that they work for a tree company. It all started because he told me, oh, your accent doesn't sound like you're from here. I'm like, oh no, I'm from New York, man. And he's like, how do I like it here in North Carolina? I was like, oh, I love it, man. I mean, I even started gardening. He told me, oh, I meet a lot of gardeners. You know that? I'm like, oh, that's cool, man. You garden? I thought I was gonna get into a good conversation with him about gardening. And he goes, no, I own a tree company, so some of them hire me to break down the trees, and I gotta take the trees out of them because they try to set the landscape up. And I was like, wow, bro. So you get wood chips? How much do you charge for wood chips? And he told me, he's like, nah, man, sometimes I don't even know what to do with them. I got so many. If you want, I'll bring you some, and, it'd be a pleasure to get rid of them. Man, I mean, the last 4 years I've been gardening, he brings me like 4 or 5 truckloads of wood chips every year. I mean, I've got more than enough of what I need. And that's all just from me prepping the garden a certain way and had my garden prepped up as if I had wood chips already. And I wanted wood chips so badly. But I just was putting it off, and I was like, I'm going to eventually get wood chips. I got to see how I get my hands on it until it finally just appeared. The same thing with the guy with the mushroom. Same thing with a lot of things in my life, man. You know what's funny is even with my Jeeps, man, I'm a big Jeep guy, and I'm gonna make a separate video on the Jeep. But because I painted my rims and they came out fly as hell, man. I even got a video. I even got a video up on them. It's probably like my fifth video back. And I had one Jeep. Something detrimental happened. You know what I'm saying? Where I let my girl borrow it, and some fucked up fucking crazy shit happened. I had that Jeep hooked up exactly how I like my fucking Jeeps to look. And I mean, I put like literally over 10 G's on that shit. As far as tires, suspension, you know, interior, engine, exhaust, fuel, everything was hooked up. And then I didn't have the Jeep anymore, you know what I'm saying? But I know I wanted one again so badly. And I came across one that was owned by an old ass fucking person, bro. And I bought this shit for like literally no almost next to nothing, to be honest with you. And I reinvested in it little by little. And right now, at the moment, I've got the Jeep literally in a state that I'm like extremely proud of. I'm like, wow, this is fucking beautiful. It looks even better than the original Jeep I had, with even better parts than the original Jeep I had. But everything just happens to work out. And I noticed that you have to really, really want it. The key to this shit, I don't care if it's knowledge, I don't care if it's information. It doesn't matter what it is, man. It's not as much as seek and ye shall find for egotistical purposes, because a lot of people want to know for the power aspect of things. It's more for like just the self-love of it, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to explain in that aspect, because I came into this reality, I feel, with so much curiosities. It all started from when I was a child, and they told me how the Egyptian pyramids were built, and I wasn't buying it. You know what I'm saying? I didn't really buy that that story. You know what I'm saying? The way they told me it was built. And I've always had a curiosity about aliens, a curiosity about life in general, and you know, just life. I don't know. It's just, why are we here? How did it, you know, what was the first thing that ever, who was the first person? You know, and I started to get into rabbit holes after rabbit holes, but I started to notice that it was coming from a childlike curiosity, right? And kids are naturally in a childlike, curious, loving state. There's really no ego involved. So I noticed that when you want things and there's really no ego involved, I got my wood chips, I got my Jeep, and a lot of people would say, oh, why don't you just buy a new car? But I mean, I've driven all the newest cars you could possibly think of. When I worked for the supplement company, I basically rented all of the best and latest technology as far as vehicles go. And it had to be that way because I was driving around all of the RSDs and CEOs of certain businesses. And I had to have the best technology to basically give them the optimal comfort. I didn't pay for it, the company paid for it. But I know that none of this technology that I had in these cars ever really appealed to me. I really didn't care for it as much as I do something that I actually visually like. I don't know what it is. It's about something about, because I used to street race, but even the muscle cars back in the day used to appeal to me more, like pure raw American muscle, more than these electrical pieces of shits that we got that are fucking plastic. I remember the cars back in the day, the frames used to be stronger. They used to be metal, which is like, you know, the Jeeps, they have metal. They're just more stronger. And in fact, actually, my girl driving my Jeep is literally what saved her life, to be honest to you. Was because of the unibody strength of that Jeep. And if not, I mean, it's crazy what would have happened. But you know, now cars, they're all plastic. You know, they're self-driving. See, I like driving even stick shift, where I know I'm driving the vehicle. See, now you don't even drive. It's just the car drives you. You know, and then you could equate that to the human body, man. The body is just driving you. You're not really driving the body. Look at how everything looked. At one point, we went through the, you know, Iron Age or whatever it may be. Cars used to be strong, made of steel. You know, the man of steel, you could look at as Superman, who that's what we equate ourselves as. You get what I'm saying? And then now when you look at humans, I mean, we drink out of plastic bottles. You know, veganism is all plastic food. Everything's just plastic. And it fucks your hormone levels up. Then I started this video with the, you know, TRT. You start to wonder why the hell men have weak ass testosterone, and it's all the microplastics and whatnot. And it's not to say that these things are above you. You put it in your mind that they hurt you and they'll hurt you faster. But just keep in mind there is a chemistry. Just be mindful of the things you're doing, and then maybe you could learn how to clean and detox yourself from the body. Look at everything that, you know, you putting in the car. At one point, you know, gasoline was leaded, and, you know, that was before we had catalytic converters. Now that we have catalytic converters, gas has to be unleaded, because if not, it'll melt the catalytic converter. But why do we have catalytic converters? Oh, to save the environment, right? Because it's like too much pollution from the engine goes into the air, and we're, you know, causing problems with the ozone layer. But then if you look at the other things that we're doing, I mean, I don't fucking get it. Like, look at, you know, what comes out of airplanes, and then we start to say that those are contrails, but they're really not. They're fucking chemtrails. But I mean, it's not to get into rabbit holes or conspiracy theories or anything like that. It's just be aware of these things, and be aware that you're the one creating this reality. It's not where things are, you know, happening to you. They're literally happening for you to some extent. And you're doing it to yourself for specific purposes. Like I said, sometimes through extremities, you can get to the extreme of something that benefits you. If you're really, 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 really poor, you have way more potential to be super rich. But the thing is that you would have to hate that situation so much out of a loving space, because hate is really love. And also fear is really love too, you know? But you can see through the lies. But do you see through the lies of things outside of you, or do you recognize the lies and corruption in you first? And this is the reason why you're recognizing and realizing the lies outside of yourself as well. Because if you're not realizing it from yourself first, then that's where people start to put themselves in victim mode, where they're pointing fingers and blaming things outside of themselves, when in actuality, it's there to begin with because of you. You know? Recognizing that first, you'll start to realize the corruption in yourself. When you realize the corruption in yourself, when you change yourself, you'll start to realize that the world outside of you starts to change as well. People say, how do you change the world? Can you change the world? You can, by changing yourself. So it's not to say that what you deemed unacceptable, such as like crimes and murders, aren't going to exist. They're always going to exist. It's just that you're not going to be experiencing them. Right? Because if you got rid of them, you wouldn't even be here to begin with. This world runs on polarities. But that's just the illusion. You're a non-dual being. You know what I'm saying? It appears that way. That's the only thing. It appears that way. But once you recognize the corruption and the lies in you, that's where you start to see it outside of yourself. That's where you're integrating. Now you're non-dual. When you know, and that's why I make these videos on the psychoactive drugs and whatnot. I've got nothing against them. Not at all. They're an experience. They're no different than if somebody lived their life, took drugs, and, you know, did steroids, and they died at a young age, right? There's a lot of bodybuilders passing out at a young age. A lot of them, you know? And that's because of the drugs. I think that's all I got for this video. Like if you like. That does help my channel out a lot, and we will talk soon.